Another new feature in Dragonframe 4.2 is a axis control we call time warp. And this would be used if you have a move that is approved, it's got a path, camera path, and maybe you have some other movers on the stage, or you've got some kind of path that you really have worked on to get nice and smooth, and now you need to change the timing of the shot. Maybe you need to stretch out time in the middle, or you need to compress just the end or extend the end. Whatever you need to do, you need to change the overall timing, and you don't want to have to put extra keyframes down. You don't want to have to start moving keyframes around. You just want to keep the path that you've got going of the move and just play with it in terms of time. So here's how it works. I have a move already that I've shot a move test on here, and if I bring the playhead back, and let's open this up a little bit so you can kind of see. This is a fairly simple move, but there's a few things going on. The camera comes down, has a settle moment, then we're rolling in and closer, and we come around to the right. So we've got a few different interesting things happening. It's fairly simple, but we have some east-west, we have north-south, we've got panning and tilting going on, and it's all pretty smooth. You can see up here in our velocity chart that this is some pretty smooth movement here. And let's say you wanted to change the timing of this shot. Maybe the shot goes into an edit that you do and you realize, gosh, I need to get this shot a second shorter. Well, maybe you just go ahead and just shrink the whole thing down. There's plenty of other ways to do that. You can just go ahead and grab all your keyframes and just take this and do a scale. So I could just make it smaller or make it longer. But let's say you want to do something more specific. And in this case, I want to speed up the ending. So this last section from 7 seconds to 10 seconds, really more from 6 seconds to 10 seconds, I'd like to squish that down, maybe take a couple seconds out of that. The beginning, we'll say, okay, we like the beginning. We want to keep that timing, but right around here we want to start speeding up so this last bit isn't so slow. Okay, so we're going to do that with time warp. Now, maybe some of you are watching this and saying, well, okay, couldn't you put some keyframes down right at the 6 second mark and kind of lock that and then go ahead and pull these keys? Yeah, you could do that, but it might throw off the move slightly and you may have to do some massaging of the keyframes. Let me just show you this easier way where you can do it with one set of keyframes on our new axis called time warp. Now I'm going to add a time warp layer to it. So here we go. I'm going to go over here. Unfortunately, you can't see it. I'm sort of going off the bottom of the screen, but believe me, down here is a menu item called Add Time Warp. Time warp. So now we've got this white line going all the way across. It's getting a little cluttered in here, so I'm just going to solo time warp, and I'll solo something I can look at like tilt and maybe pan. Those are doing some important things here. Okay, so now I'll be able to see as I'm changing the timing what's happening. All right, let's open this up a little bit so we can really dig in here. Now you'll see that the time warp layer is a straight diagonal line, and that means there's no effect on the timing of the shot, okay? So down here it says the move position is 117 and the frame is 117. And if we go along and move this playhead, you'll see it gives us a reading of what the move is in the frame number, what we've programmed, to start with, and where it's moved to. And at this point, nothing's moved. We'll start by just shrinking down the move in time. I'm going to grab this keyframe on time warp, and I'm just going to slide it down 2 seconds. So luckily we've got this readout there that can tell us 48 frames, and I can also see with our what I call our watermelon lines there that we've gone 2 seconds. So I'm going to let go. So now we've taken out 2 seconds, and it's just a straight scale. So this would be the same thing as just scaling the shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a key right here, and we're going to adjust it to try to keep this side of the line in the old timing and allow this section to be the sped up part. So let's see how that goes. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to use the option key, and I'm going to pull this down. And I don't know if you can see this, but as I'm pulling this, you can see the colored lines, which is the actual new move. So that's the new move, and it's starting to get closer lined up with the old move. Okay, and I'm going to move this around a little bit. So if we want this area to line back up a little bit better, I'm going to have to pull this line down, an option, and I'm just going to pull it down. There we go. Now we get the beginning of the move more like it was before. We've got a nice soft curve happening here, and then it kind of flattens out. So this is the only time where you don't want a velocity curve to come into a nice smooth pinch here at 0. When you're dealing with this time warp, you want it to be up here and flatten out. And that's actually going to be more accurate. If you try to squeeze it down here, you're going to be really slowing all of these motors way, way, way down, and you're not going to get the effect you want. I've got the timeline how I want it. It's sort of straight diagonal. I've adjusted this key so that there's no kink in the overall velocity on the other axes, and then it speeds up to the end. Now, I can look at all of this. If you're distracted by the gray lines, you can hit this cool button right here, which will turn off the gray lines, so that's kind of cool. And actually, I'll just go ahead and turn off the time warp visibility there. And here's what's kind of cool here. We can look at the effect that the time warp is having, and maybe we'll even put on a couple other things here. Okay, so I'm turning on more of the tracks. Okay, now I'm going to toggle the power of the time warp on and off, and you'll see that it's particularly crushing the second half of our scene where we want to speed up to that end. Okay, so let's go ahead, we'll leave it on, and we'll shoot a test and see how that goes. Now before I shoot this test, I want to save what I already have here, so I'm going to save this move test as girl 1. So we've shot our new move test with the time warp on it. Let's go ahead and look at that. So you see the beginning is just like it was before, and then we sped up that, getting to that final position. So that's the same, and then we got up there a couple seconds earlier than before. There's something else I need to tell you about time warp, which is that you have to enable it on all the axes you want it to affect by clicking these little clock buttons on at the end of the axis. So these have to be on, and when you first put on time warp, none of these will be on. I had it on already, and they were already turned on, so that is something I need to mention. So that way, if you happen to have like a mover or something else that you don't want sped up, you go ahead and just leave those off. And you can see this happen in real time, by the way. If I come out like this and say, let's turn that off for track, and you'll see that as I go, all these axes are then stretching back out. So obviously we just did a time scrunch on this thing, but we could also do a time stretch. If I grab the time warp and bring it down, you could stretch out time. Let's make this a little bigger so we can see what we're doing. This over here. So you could grab this guy and stretch it down and adjust it, and let me get rid of this middle one. So now I've stretched the whole move quite a bit, and at any point you could pop a key in here, and then you can really push and pull on the time. You can even make time go back and forth. Watch this. This is kind of neat. I'm going to delete that guy. Okay, let's say we really go out here on the timeline, and then we put a key way out here. Okay, if I pull this down, you'll see that it's actually taking time and repeating it. So this move would go forward, and then it would go backwards. In fact, if we go down the line even more, put another key, and this guy we pull up, you can see we could take a move and have it go forward and backwards, because this line always represents the move in time. Let's take this guy and make it a key like that. Yeah, so you could do some crazy stuff. I hope this has been helpful, and good luck with programming. Time warp.